Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. At the time, in the heart of a small-town American suburb, Emily Thompson, a young white woman from an influential family, was married to Michael Johnson, a brilliant and ambitious black man. Their union had been met with skepticism and hostility by some members of the community, and especially by Emily's parents. The tension was palpable, but their love seemed stronger than prejudice. Everything changed the day Emily gave birth to their first child, a dark-skinned boy who inherited Michael's features. Her parents, unable to overcome their racial prejudices, reacted violently. After endless arguments and legal pressure, they managed to convince Emily to leave Michael and resume her normal life, without their children. Devastated but manipulated by her family, Emily was evicted from her own home and separated from them. Michael was left alone to raise their children in a neighborhood where the color of his skin already attracted suspicious glances. For 13 long years, Emily buried her pain, but she could never forget her children. Michael, for his part, raised them with love and dignity, despite the judgment and financial hardship. The children grew up intelligent, confident, and proud of their heritage, almost unaware of the trauma that had torn their parents apart. Then, 13 years later, an unexpected event occurred. Emily, having rebuilt her life far from everything, found herself facing a choice that would shatter not only her own existence, but also those of her children and Michael. What happened that day would shock the entire community, overturning prejudices and revealing a truth Emily would never have believed possible. 13 years earlier, Emily Thompson stood in front of the large family home, her hands trembling and her heart broken. Michael Johnson, her husband, stood beside her, holding their 2 young children in his arms. Emily's cold and uncompromising parents saw only the color of the children's skin, utterly rejecting Michael and everything he represented. "Emily, you know it's better this way, for you, for them," said her mother, in an icy voice. But Emily couldn't take her eyes off her children. Her son, small but lively, reached out his arms to her, and her daughter, still a baby, cried softly, sensing the tension in the air. Michael held Emily close, feeling her despair. "They are our children, no matter what you think, they will stay with me," he murmured, determined. The judge, influenced by pressure from the Thompson family and the social climate of the neighborhood, handed down a heartbreaking decision: Emily had to leave the house and let Michael care for the children. It was a brutal departure, marked by tears, stifled cries, and a bitter sense of injustice. In the days that followed, Emily left for another city, cut off from her children. Every night, she cried silently, wondering how she could ever repair what had been broken. Michael, despite his own pain, strove to create a stable home for the children, teaching them pride, resilience, and the importance of family love, even in the face of adversity. It was in this atmosphere of separation and silent struggle that a long period began which would shape the destiny of this family, until the day the past would come back to strike in an unexpected way. The wind was blowing hard that morning across the vast estate of the Montclairs, a white family of ancient European nobility, known for their wealth and name. The manor, majestic and cold, seemed to reject any trace of human warmth, just like those who lived there. In the center of the large hall, a woman stood, trembling but proud. Amara, a young black woman with a gentle and noble beauty, held 2 small children close to her, a boy and a girl, aged 3 and 5. Their eyes shone with fear and incomprehension. Facing her, Charles Montclair, her husband and heir to the family fortune, remained silent. His averted gaze betrayed shame and fear. Behind him, the real storm, Margaret Montclair, his mother, screamed with rage. "You have sullied our name," she shouted. "Look at them. Look at their faces. Do you think these children will ever be accepted here?" Amara didn't reply. She knew that talking to this woman was pointless. Her heart was breaking, but her gaze remained dignified. "I love them, Margaret. And your son loved me too. My son made a mistake. A mistake he will pay for all his life. But you are leaving this house today, and you will never come back." Margaret signaled to the servants, who approached timidly. Amara stepped back, hugging her children tighter. Charles wanted to intervene, but his mother stopped him in an icy tone. If you want to inherit your name and your empire, you let her go. Choose. An agonizing silence fell over the hall. Amara felt tears welling up in her eyes. She hoped, one last time, that he would say something. That he would reach out to her. But Charles simply lowered his head. I'm sorry, Amara, he murmured. She gazed at him for a long moment, her heart aching, then turned on her heel. In the pouring rain, she left the manor, her children in her arms, without looking back. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her, like a coffin being closed. That day, Amara lost everything, her home, her husband, and her illusions. But what the Montclairs didn't know was that she would rebuild her life. Far from their contempt, in pain and solitude, she would rise again. And 13 years later, fate would bring Amara back to the home that had been taken from her. This time, she would not come as a victim, but as a powerful, respected and feared woman. 13 years had passed since that rainy morning when Amara left the Montclair estate. 13 years of struggle, silence, and rebirth. In a large coastal city, Amara had rebuilt her life stone by stone. She had founded a small artisanal clothing business, then, with perseverance, had turned it into an international brand, Amara & Company. Her creations, symbols of elegance and feminine strength, had captivated thousands of women around the world. And ironically, the Montclair couture boutiques, owned by the same family that had rejected her, were now distributing her brand without even knowing that she was its founder. But on that day, an unexpected invitation arrived on his desk. Humanitarian Business Gala, Domaine Montclair. Under the high patronage of the Montclair family. Amara remained motionless, the letter in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly. 13 years old. And now he was being invited to return to where it had all begun. A slight smile crossed his face. Perfect. It's time, she murmured. On the night of the gala, the estate's grand avenue was illuminated with golden lanterns. Luxury cars paraded by, dropping off guests dressed in sumptuous attire. When an elegant black car stopped in front of the mansion's gates, all eyes turned. The door opened slowly, and Amara got out. Her flowing white dress contrasted with her ebony skin, and her bearing exuded absolute confidence. Beside her, a young man and a young woman, her children, now teenagers, walked with her, their eyes proud. The murmurs began immediately. Is that her? Amara Montclair? No, that's impossible. She was chased away, wasn't she? They say she now runs a multi-million-dollar company. Amara entered the hall that had been taken from her. Each step resonated like a silent revenge. And there, facing her, Margaret Montclair, now aged but still arrogant, froze. You, she stammered. Amara gave a slight smile. Mrs. Montclair. It's been a long time. Charles appeared in turn, his features tired, his eyes filled with regret. He had never forgotten. But the biggest shock for him came when the gala's host announced in a clear voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the honorary chair and principal donor of this evening, Mrs. Amara Johnson Montclair, founder of Amara & Company. A crushing silence fell over the room. Margaret was speechless. Charles, pale as a ghost, felt his heart sink. And Amara, upright and serene, took the microphone. Years ago, I was driven from this place with my children. Today, I return not for revenge, but to show that dignity, perseverance, and love always triumph over hatred. The applause erupted in the hall, loud, sincere, liberating. The Montclairs, for their part, remained motionless, swallowed up by shame. After Amara's speech, the atmosphere at the gala remained tense. The guests congratulated her respectfully, but glances often turned to the Montclair family, petrified with shame. Margaret, pale, stared at Amara as if she were seeing a ghost. Charles, on the other hand, seemed on the verge of collapsing. When the crowd began to disperse, Amara walked away onto the terrace, admiring the illuminated garden. A cool breeze caressed her face. She remembered every corner. It was here that she had played with her children, before being thrown out like a criminal. Behind her, a hesitant voice echoed. Amara. She turned around slowly. Charles was there, his eyes pleading. He had aged, marked by remorse. You came back. You have no idea how much I regret it. Regret doesn't change what you've done, she replied calmly. I was weak. My mother, she forced me to choose. No, Charles. You chose to remain silent. You chose your comfort over your family. He lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. Our children, he murmured. They've grown so much. I haven't been allowed to see them, I know, but every day I've thought about them. They are strong, educated, and dignified children. They grew up without your name, but with my love. At that moment, Margaret stepped onto the terrace. Her voice cracked like a whip. So it's true. You came back to publicly humiliate us. I don't need to humiliate you, Mrs. Montclair. You've already done that all by yourself. Amara replied coldly. Margaret takes a step forward, trembling with anger. Do you think your money makes you superior? That your success erases who you are? What I am, madam, is a woman you have underestimated. Margaret wanted to reply, but Amara cut her off abruptly. You expelled me because my children were black. You said they would never have a place in your world. Yet, look at them. She beckoned to her children, who approached. His son, Elliot, now grown and self-assured, wore a badge that read, Lead Architect, Johnson Group. His daughter, Leah, held a thank you plaque presented by the gala organizers for their major donation to a foundation for underprivileged children. It is they, Margaret. The children you treated as a disgrace. It is they who are now funding the reconstruction of your schools, your hospitals, and who saved this estate from bankruptcy. Margaret's eyes widened. What? Amara crossed her arms. Yes. When your family business was on the verge of bankruptcy, Amara and Company bought 60% of your shares. So, in a way. She paused, her voice soft but firm. This land now belongs to me. Silence fell, heavy as a thunderclap. Margaret staggered, unable to speak. Charles looked at her, devastated. Amara turned on her heel and headed for the exit. Before going through the door, she added calmly. The difference between you and me, Margaret, is that I learned to build instead of destroy. Then she walked away into the night, followed by her children. This time, she wasn't running away anymore. It was she, now, who was leaving the Montclairs behind. The day after the gala, the Montclair residence was unrecognizable. The silence was heavy, stifling. Margaret hadn't slept. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the family portraits lined up in the long hallway, all the faces white, proud, frozen in the past. For the first time, she felt a void in this lineage that she had defended with such arrogance. She finally understood that everything she had protected, the name, the reputation, the supposed purity of her family, was worthless compared to what she had destroyed, the love of her son and the dignity of an innocent woman. Charles entered, looking exhausted. Mother, she was right. Everything she said. Shut up, Charles, Margaret replied in a broken voice. I can no longer erase what I have done. He looked at her for a long time, then said. Maybe not. But you can at least try. A few hours later, a car parked in front of a large modern building on the coast. Margaret came downstairs, dressed in a simple coat. For the first time in a long time, she no longer displayed her arrogance. She had made an appointment. Amara was waiting for him, standing in the glass-walled lobby of her company, surrounded by works of art and trophies of excellence. Their eyes met. Time seemed to stand still. Margaret advances slowly. I didn't come here to justify myself. I came to ask for forgiveness. Amara remained silent, staring at her with an unreadable expression. You made me go through humiliation, poverty, and loneliness. You took everything from me. Why now? Margaret sighed. Because I've seen what you've become. Because I've understood that your greatness didn't come from your color, nor your name, but from your heart. And because I don't want to die with this shame on my conscience. Amara closed her eyes for a moment. She could have rejected her, belittled her, returned the pain she had suffered. But deep down, she knew she had already won, not by destroying Margaret, but by proving that one could triumph without hatred. I forgive you, Margaret. Not for you. For me. Because I refuse to let your hatred live on in my memory. Tears welled up in the old woman's eyes. Thanks. She murmured, trembling. You are stronger than I will ever be. A few weeks later, an unexpected event took place. At an international conference on women's entrepreneurship, Amara was invited to give a speech. Among the guests, a man stood up in the audience, Charles Montclair. In front of the cameras, he spoke. I am Charles Montclair, the man who failed to defend the woman he loved. I am here to say publicly what I should have said 13 years ago, Amara, I betrayed you. And I do not deserve your forgiveness. But I want the world to know that without you, I am nothing. A murmur rippled through the room. Amara froze, then nodded gently. I've already forgiven you, Charles. But from now on, our paths will never cross again. I loved you, yes. But today, I cherish my peace. Applause erupted. Amara left the stage, her eyes shining but her heart at peace. Margaret, who was watching the broadcast from her home, cried for the first time without anger, tears of regret and admiration. In the days that followed, a sign was installed at the entrance to the Montclair estate. Amara Montclair Center for Peace and Equality. Funded by Amara's children, it became a training ground for disadvantaged youth. Where once contempt and hatred reigned, now reconciliation and hope reigned. Amara, standing in front of the renovated building, murmured. May this place, which was my exile, become the home of those who are rejected. And as the sun set over the gardens, one could read on her face the most beautiful victory, that of forgiveness. Years had passed since the reopening of the Amara Montclair Center for Peace and Equality. The gardens, once a symbol of coldness and exclusion, were now filled with laughter, music, and children of all backgrounds. The walls of the old manor still bore their scars, but now they breathed rebirth. Amara continued her humanitarian work around the world. Her creations had become synonymous with feminine strength, and her story inspired thousands of young women to fight for their dignity. Yet, despite the awards, the travels and the successes, she remained humble, living simply, close to her children and those she helped. One summer morning, the press announced unexpected news. Margaret Montclair passed away peacefully at her home, at the age of 87. In her will, she had asked for only one thing. To be buried near the Amara Montclair Center, where I learned what it truly means to be human. This request devastated Amara. She remained silent for a long moment, before breathing softly. Even the hardest hearts eventually understand. A few years later, a large tribute was organized in the Central Park. Hundreds of people had gathered, students, volunteers, former employees, and representatives from all over the world. In the center of the stage, a statue was unveiled. It depicted Amara, standing with open arms, surrounded by two children, a symbol of love, courage, and forgiveness. A simple phrase was engraved on the base. Driven out by hatred, returned by the light. His children, Elliot and Leah, now adults, addressed the crowd. Our mother taught us that true power lies not in revenge, but in peace. Thanks to her, we learned to walk with our heads held high, even when the world looks down on us. The applause was long, sincere, and full of emotion. A gentle breeze drifted through the trees, and for a moment, Elliot thought he heard his mother's voice whispering. Be proud. But above all, be fair. Years later, when visitors entered the Amara Montclair Center, they were greeted by a message engraved at the entrance. To all the rejected women, to all the despised children, to all those who have been silenced, your worth depends on no one. walk in your own light. And so, the story of Amara, that of a black woman expelled for having loved, and who returned as a symbol of hope. It became a legend, passed down from generation to generation, reminding everyone that dignity cannot be bought. It is earned, protected, and lived.